William Sparky Smith Sr. with us tonight. He is the manager of Election Integrity Project Arizona. You can find them on Twitter at EEIPAZ. EEIPAZ, ladies and gentlemen. Definitely go and follow them. What they do is instrumental to our rights and liberties and freedoms. William, the Election Integrity Organization has been around for a while, and this is what the left is saying about your organization. You are whining and complaining because Donald Trump lost this race. And quite frankly, you all should just, become silent, commiserate, just suck it up, and allow the process to take place. Your retort to that, Mrs. Smith?
Ken, what Election Integrity Project does is we recruit citizens, volunteers. There's not one paid person in our entire organization. In Election Integrity Project California, Election Integrity Project Arizona, Election Integrity Project Nevada. Not one paid person. A lot of us contribute a lot of our own money each month to keep these organizations going.
Yep.
What we do, we recruit and train people to research, observe, and document election malfeasance, election issues. Here in Arizona, we're dramatically handicapped because we as citizens don't have the right to go in and observe up close and personal any of this election process. So, because the statutes of Arizona call for, like nearly every state, where a lot of these positions you have to have a member from a different political party. In other words, if you're involved in a ballot chain of custody issue, transporting ballots or something, you have one person that's a Republican, one person that's a Democrat, or one person that's a Libertarian or a Greenie. You shouldn't have two people from the same party in a lot of these positions.
Yes.
So to that end, we recruited really, really hard for the last year and a half to get volunteers to volunteer to be poll workers. So to that end, we were actually, the Maricopa Board of Supervisors told us that they were very concerned that we wouldn't have enough Republican volunteers.
Really?
So we recruited hard. We recruited hard for them. And guess what? The county chairman, Chairman Ray, would virtually never appoint any of our trained observers to be political party observers. And so we got to the point that we told people, if they want to be appointed, don't let anybody know that you've been through our training, because they don't want people out there that know the statutes. We train people in the statutes so that if you see something that's wrong, that you'll recognize it as being wrong. And so towards that end, there's an app that we bought for the whole state of Arizona called Reportic, Reportic.com. And when you report it, Reported is an organization that you can report things anonymously. Mm-hmm. The reason that we really support it so hard and paid the money to get it for the state of Arizona is so that it's like a timestamp whenever you go to a check, when you check into work, if you had to do on a time clock.
Yeah.
So whenever we get a GPS and we get a timestamp on where that report came from. We have any idea who did it if they don't report it to it unless they identify. They can identify themselves to us. So to that end, that's what we're working. So not only that, for example, right now, here's just how bad and corrupt the system is in Arizona.
Yes.
We have proprietary software that Election Integrity Project California has done, put together over the last 10 years. We can't even get a copy of the Arizona voter rolls that somebody in the Republican Party, we don't know whether it's the chairman or whether it's a legislator, is getting it, and they're going to pay us to run it so that we can identify. They did a test run with us on about 35,000 voters out of Maricopa County. We
Yeah.
found lots and lots of problems with it. So they now want to try to do it for the whole state of Arizona. We were promised that over 30 hours ago. We still don't have it.
Wow.
And they're paying us to do it. But so we followed up on it. Why has that not happened? Internal bickering within political parties is what we were told.
I, I'm sitting here and I'm shocked because all of the conversation has been on one side of the fence that the Democrat-Marxists committed election fraud and international irregularities that came along with Dominion software voting. But the Republican Party itself is also involved in maintaining power and control during the election process. I gotta ask you, how many people?
We're a nonpartisan. We're an
Yeah,
absolute nonpartisan group, and what we're fighting has nothing to do with political parties, Ken. It has
yeah,
all to do with whether they are believe in a central government type of a corporatist type form of government where somebody's ruling from the top down, and they hate and detest we constitutionalists that believe in self-governance, and that's all we're asking for is our civil rights to be able to try to protect our election system to where we can have a fair and honest elections.
exactly. And so that's what I'm pinpointing here is the fact that so many people are so naive. I too am completely naive to the fact that both political parties wrest so much control that it infuriates those who want clean elections, but it also confuses individuals in terms of the processes by which they're protected in terms of their election rights. In terms of election irregularities, what role in Arizona does the average citizen have in terms of first observing, but secondly reporting?
Well, up until last year, when we ran an observer bill trying to get in Arizona to where we citizens would have the right to observe political process, much like they formally could in Pennsylvania, the
Mm-hmm.
way they can in California, but they're fighting desperately to keep it because now that the leftist and the administrative state government people are learning that we are truly a threat to their. Yeah, our parent company in California trained over nearly 4,000 volunteers to observe the polls there. They have written out and documented nearly 1,000 election malfeasance things that in affidavits, just like a police report. We
Yes.
have a uniform form, and so that's the reason that California is finally getting the word out that the people out there are fighting to save their. They don't want to live under Marxism, and
Yeah.
you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of Democrats that voted for Republican candidates this last time around. But because of the corrupt election system, and unless we can somehow or another, the word gets out on this Dominion and this other software issues,
Yes.
I mean, it's just, we've all been corrupted, and especially the major big cities in these counties. The bigger the city and the bigger the county, the more likely there is corruption. Because
Maricopa
they're
County.
they're the tail that wags the dogs in these states.
Maricopa County is the fourth largest county in America. It happens to have the largest, one of the largest population of Republican voters, and yet
We're the largest Republican county in the nation. That's true.
wow, and yet it is right now in the crosshairs of election fraud. Can you give us an example in terms of what you're fighting in terms of election fraud in Maricopa
Well,
County in Arizona?
Well, for example, when we ran our observer bill, those of us in Arizona, this is where the symbiotic relationship between California and Arizona is really paying off. We were much, much more familiar with the political process in Arizona compared to them in California. We had no skills when it came to observing, but they had, until recently, they had hardly any political. They hadn't worked on the political side of really pursuing legislation or trying they anyway. So we've learned from them; they've learned from us.
Yes.
So I had preliminarily done tremendous amount of hours on supporting our observer bill, and we were trying to get it very similar to North Dakota. North Dakota has by far the best observer bill, and it just basically says that no citizen shall be impeded in watching the entirely chain of custody of the ballots from inception to storage.
Really?
And yeah, and so that's what we were trying to mimic here, very similar to it. Well, I'm doing my handwork. I know a lot of the people on the board of supervisors. I did this, I did that. I reached out to the chairman of the board, to others, and was doing my homework, what you're supposed to do, trying to line up support. I was working. We'd reached out to the county recorder's offices in several of the counties. Well, we get up there with our legislation, and every one of the county recorders that we went and called on, they had someone from their office up there fighting us on this observer bill. Maricopa County Recorder's Office had somebody up there. Members of the Board of Supervisors of Maricopa County were working the halls at the legislature after hours against our observer bill. And so and we heard that they were going to take over this thing, and we were really trying to say, hey, if you guys want some real political cover for when you change up the system so much next year, why don't you support this observer bill, and we'll be the eyes and the ears to give you political cover. Well, they fought us. They did everything in their power. We never got that bill out of, we got it out of committee, and it never made it across the courtyard. It never went over to the Senate. Out of the 8 bills that we were either sponsored or supporting, 1 made it across the courtyard, and then it never got a hearing in the committee on the other side, and it was one that the AG was supporting, advocating for a form so a citizen could report election malfeasance. We don't even have a form now.
Wow.
Because of our organization, and we knew a couple of people in the AG's office, we basically let the AG know, hey, at the very least, you better have an online reporting form to where they can do it. So the AG, to his credit, he did put up a website that gives a person the right to fill the form. The Secretary of State, up until then, the Secretary of State was required to have an 800 number that a citizen could call in. Guess when they open that 800 number? They open it the morning of the polls on election day, and they close it when the polls close on election day. They don't do anything about early voting. They keep any of that. It's just from what we've been able to find out. And anyway, it's the deck is stacked against the citizens. That's the reason I say it's the civil rights issue, Ken.
Exactly. Because I'm sitting here, and let me play devil's advocate for a moment. You want the North Dakota bill, but North Dakota is sparsely populated. They probably don't spend as much time or money in terms of training their people. And quite frankly, if you did it in Maricopa County, you would have 1,000 people standing there watching people count votes. It wouldn't work. What was your retort to that?
Well, in California, you can look over the shoulder of the person that's opening the envelopes. So you can look at the signature on that ballot, and you can see the signature that he's comparing against on the screen whenever the barcode on that envelope pulls it up on a mail-in ballot.
Yes.
And the thing about it is, you know, it it's never been a problem. And when I say we train people to observe, we have very ironclad rules about the way you should dress, the fact that you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't speak to anybody except the poll inspector that runs that particular voting center or polling place, and on and on and on. You cannot be disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 I have been a political observer several times in elections. And you go in and you introduce yourself to the inspector, and they ask you where to sit. And I said, well, from time to time, I'm going to move around. And they said, okay, just don't be disruptive. I said, you will not be disruptive. I showed them my cell phone. In Arizona, you can't take a picture inside of the polling place. I show them that I flip my otter so it covers my camera eye. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, on my phone here, I've got statutes and notes and I take notes when I'm doing this. Is that a problem? I said, I'll be happy to show you anytime you want to see it. No problem. So it's not going to be, and that's what everybody thinks.
Yep.
But that's not proven out to be the case anywhere. I mean, that's their immediately retort. Oh, you're going to be disruptive. No, it won't be disruptive to anybody unless they're, instead of counting legal votes, they're trying to do what I call is election tally count. In other
Yeah.
words, that's not a legal vote if they're trying to create a tally count.
Now, William, there are lots of people who are completely upset right now as American citizens that their vote may not count. There are some states judicially will be advised, like Pennsylvania, to throw out possibly millions of votes because they didn't meet the standard. If the Election Integrity Project of Arizona had the chance to recommend to a competent Secretary of State in overseeing elections for the state itself, what changes would you recommend? If there were three big changes that should be done for election year 2022, what three changes should take place, and how should people work with you to make that happen?
Number one, you should allow political observers and every polling place, every place a ballot is being handled except by the actual voter.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only time that we as observers or a citizen has no right to be close to that ballot. In other words, when they're handling and somebody's voting their ballot, but once they turn that ballot over to either the voting machine or the counting machine or whatever, to
Mm-hmm.
protect the integrity of the system, I don't care how many laws you write and everything else, there will not be a better election integrity system than individual citizens having the right to walk into that polling place without an appointment, without being disruptive. If there's somebody already standing at that place, they need to wait and tell the inspector, I would like to, if that person's willing to take a break somewhere down the road, I would like to observe there for a little while. But if they say no, they were here first, then I don't think I have any right. But it's the individual citizens that have got to become engaged, because the politicians aren't going to save us. The political parties sure aren't going to save us. So you've got to get the citizens involved, just like in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
They got up there and they moved it away from the window, and then they covered the windows. When Maricopa County built their counting room for their big high-powered machines, they built a wall. They built a brand new room inside of a big warehouse. And guess what? They put a double pane window there, and the machines are 25 to 30 feet away from where a citizen can possibly observe that. The citizen should have the right to walk in there with their hands behind their back and observe that thing up close and personal if they are not interfering with anything. Just being close to somebody that's working or watching a machine working is not interfering.
Want to
That's
ask you
number
very
one.
I want to ask you very quickly on that right there on that part of observation. In the state of Arizona, and I want you to proceed with the other things that you're going to recommend. But in the state of Arizona, how many people can actually observe up close the counting of the ballots?
Well, on the mail-in ballot, by statute, you're allowed two per counting room. And so, of the two largest political parties. So, right now in Arizona, the independents or the PNDs now have almost more people than the Democrats do, slightly behind the Republicans, but about on par with the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we were an independent party, that would close the Democrats out of the counting room in a lot of these counties because there's more PNDs than there are Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Because the political parties are so corrupt here in Arizona that a huge people are just a bigger and bigger piece are saying, pox on both of your party houses, we're out of here.
Yeah.
And so, but Maricopa County has 22 stations, or they did. I haven't been down this year to see what they had this year.
Yes.
But they had 22 stations in which they opened the mail ballots. That means that there were 44 people in there. You had two people from each party at each station.
Yes.
I mean, of opposite parties. I misspoke. Opposite parties. So there were 44 workers in there, and you could have one Republican lawyer and you could have one Democrat lawyer in that room. So how much control or oversight, not oversight, but just observation would you have? By my standard, you should be able to have 22 citizens standing by, one behind each one of those workstations.
Yeah. That makes sense. What other recommendations should the Secretary of State consider for 2022?
Well, if you really want election integrity, you need to go back to the original concept of absentee balloting. When I was a kid in my first election and for a number of the first elections, if you had to be able to be out of the county on election day to be able to qualify as an absentee ballot.
Yep.
And you had to sign an affidavit that you were going to be out of the county to be able, and like if you had a trip scheduled or something like that, because once I had to do it because back then I worked for General Motors and I had to go to Detroit.
Yes.
on a business trip. So anyway, but that was the original requirement. So that's the first thing, because voting by mail is the most by far easily abused. And the other thing that we need to do, and it's not particularly a voting integrity issue, but the other thing is these states have got to close up what's happening in these nursing homes, Ken.
Really?
Because of the Help America Act. And the federal government's an enabler on this. They're the one that have made this so easily abused about helping people of a lesser represented minorities, whether they be political, not racial or
Yes.
language or whatever the groups were, but where it's really being abused to no end, and it's a ballot harvester's dream. That's what's going on in these nursing homes. And so, like Arizona, the way they were able to get 90% voting out of these things, they enroll them in absentee ballot, or in Arizona, it's called a permanent early voting list. So then the political parties get, every day when these ballots come in and they process these ballots, the political parties get a list of who's submitted their ballots and who hadn't, that's on the permanent early voting list. And then they work them like crazy to try to get their turnout. So what's happened is they're getting these people on the permanent early voting list. And in Arizona, for example, and it's this way in most states, you have to be adjudged to be mentally incompetent, not determined by a doctor or the nursing home staff that you're mentally incompetent. You have to be adjudged. And they really need to have to get families involved on these elders that are under elder care, because they're being abused so bad. As far as it's a ballot harvester's dream,
Yes.
because what I work anyway. We need to dramatically tighten that up, because these people are doing things. The help in these nursing homes, if they have any corruption, the going rate on the straight street of a collected ballot in Arizona is a lot cheaper than it was in Minneapolis. In Arizona, it's only $50.
Mm-hmm.
So, but somebody with a few connections in a few nursing homes can make a lot of money generating ballots.
Wow.
And so, and of course, the voter rolls. None of the states are cleaned up their voter rolls, with a very few exceptions. In Arizona, and the voter rolls not being cleaned up give them tremendous opportunities because you get somebody, for example, in this special election board that I worked at in Arizona, I ran across a name that voted in 2006. They didn't vote in 2008. They didn't vote in 2010. They didn't vote in 2012. But in 2014, there was a request for a signature update. They voted in 2014. In 2016, there was another request for a signature update. They voted in 2016. In 2018, there was another request for a signature update. I would bet big money that person was either incompetent,
Mm-hmm.
or they were a vegetable, or whatever they are. And so somebody got their name, changed the signature slightly, and then they voted a ballot that year. And so that's the kind of stuff that's going on in these nursing homes, Ken.
I'm very, very concerned about how far down the road to communism we've come in America, where you have virtual one party rule. And in places like Guyana and other third world nations, people come into the home and sign you up for your ballot, telling you what party you're going to vote for.
There's parts of Arizona that happens.
No kidding! No! William, that can't happen here in America.
Can anybody remember? We are the only nation in the world that basically is not already living under socialism. And most of these, for example, in the Central American countries, South American countries, Mexico, the only give me that a lot of the citizens get from their government is comes election time, when somebody comes in and either buys them a meal or does this or outright pays them money, or whatever how they do it, and they basically line up their, there's a deal in South America, in South Texas. This was reported in a Senate hearing in Texas. The Meals on Wheels lady and guy had a route.
Oh my God.
That they were running around, and they said, and every time they could find somebody, they'd register them. Okay, I'm going to register you to vote. When you get your vote, hang on to this thing, and I'll come back, and whenever I come back to pick it up, I'll bring you a dessert, or I'll bring you this, or I'll bring you that. And it was testament. It was under oath in a Texas Senate hearing. We have versions of that here in Arizona.
William.
And ballot harvesting is a huge deal, and that's what led me to get involved in Election Integrity Project, because I'd been following ballot harvesting since I lived in Dallas, when a Dallas City Councilwoman named Diane Ragsdale got caught with 68 ballots in her purse. Some of them voted, some of them signed, lots of them just blank. So I knew what ballot harvesting was before I got out here. And back until we got our ballot harvesting law passed here in Arizona, people were coming in and bringing big boxes of ballots and dumping them off on election day. Well, that that lawsuit got sued immediately. It took us 6 years to get that anti-ballasting heart law passed. So then I spent the next 2 years trying to figure out a way to get it enforced.
Yes.
No elected official is willing to go after another elected official. It's almost impossible to get somebody to do that.
We got a lot of cleaning up
We've got a
to
problem,
do.
Houston.
Yes. William,
Well, thanks for all you're doing. I appreciate it, sir.
William, hey, we're not through with you yet. We're going to be calling
Okay.
upon you in the coming months to, and my thoughts have turned to recommendations. I should do a show with a number of you grassroots leaders to put
But
together a comprehensive plan for elections in the United States of America and to force the politicians, especially in Washington, D.C., to effectuate change by passing legislation that would include funding for enforcement from the federal level. We cannot go down this road to communism. I'm not walking down that road. You, sir, what your final remarks?
well, number one, I want to thank you for this opportunity. That it's exciting, especially because to solve this problem, Ken, we're going to have to go after, and all of us, no matter what party we're in, it's going down to the bees of this world. And so we got to become the worker bee party. And the color of the worker bee party is basically going to be blue. It's going to be blue uniforms and blue collars. There's going to be blue collar blacks. There's going to be blue collar browns, and it's going to be redneck blue collared worker whites. Because we're the ones that by far have the most to lose. Because our livelihoods and so much of it depend on our individual rights, our right of movement, our right of choice. And the people that are attracted to the corporate form of government are the college educated that have been working in corporations and stuff that are used to a top down. But whenever they told us from the time I was a little kid, the price of freedom is not free, they're not talking about writing a check. They're talking about being involved. You've got to become involved. You got to become involved in the political process. You got to become involved and become obsessed to making sure that nobody's stealing and that your voice is true and honestly heard and not somebody that's trumping up and dumping a bunch of created ballots, to swing a vote the other way, either whether they're doing it electronically or supposedly like they did it in Philadelphia and they paid that mobster millions of dollars to generate several 100,000 votes in an incredibly short period of time because the turnout in Pennsylvania was way above their wildest imagination. And so that's the reason that so many precincts in Pennsylvania voted over how many registered voters they had in the deal, because that's what it took to overpower the system.
Exactly.
We got to become involved, Cam.
How can people contact you, William, in your organization? You have a tremendous organization out there in Arizona. Great volunteers, great warriors. How can they contact you?
My personal email is managermgr at eiaz.org. EIPAZ.org. MGR at EIPAZ.org. We've got a website, we've got a Facebook page. We welcome any and all people, but especially worker bees. We've got to have people that are willing to work.
Oh,
we don't need any plantation owners. We need field hands, Kim.
There you go. we need people who don't have a lot of suggestions for other people to do. They got to follow out their own directions. I'll be contacting you very soon for a follow-up in December. There is a need for cleanup in America.
So I've got a question for you, sir.
Sure. Yes, sir.
So when will this be seen, and how will I get a link to it?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I get to promote myself. We have three channels that you can go to pick it up tomorrow morning. It is the TECN TV channel on YouTube, the the Exceptional Conservative channel on YouTube, and also Kenneth McClinton on BitChute. And I will personally send to you a recording of tonight's interview. It'll be in your inbox tomorrow morning for Happy Thanksgiving to share, because we have got to clean this up. I'm such... right now, I am so committed to us having a national election card with a fingerprint requirement for voting, paper voting only, no electronic voting, and it has to be done in person, or an absentee only, no mail-ins. See, I am moving in that direction, and I think we all can work together to make certain that the election 2022 is completely and totally different from the fraud election that we've had this year. William, thank you so much. God bless you.
Well, thank
Happy
you for
Thanksgiving.
all you're doing, sir.
Yes, sir.
To you and your family, the best.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, William Smith with us tonight. The Election Integrity Project, Arizona. You have got to get involved. There's no longer an excuse, because the American people have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray by the corporatists like Mark Zuckerberg and George Soros, and as well the political parties that endear themselves to you to always solve your problem as long as they keep the power. This is not acceptable. Not acceptable at all. We'll be right back with more of the best in urban conservative talk. You all know at this particular hour of the night that I always have to ask you two pertinent questions. Two very pertinent questions. Number one, do you know where your children are? Number two, do your children know where you are? Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?